everyone, and welcome to our fourth session in American English Live Series 20. I'm Dr. Darlene Wiggins Dockery, and I will be your host today. And behind the scenes, my colleague Doria will be our moderator. She'll be helping to answer questions and responding to your comments during the session. Let's begin today with these wonderful audience comments from our last recent webinar, Teaching Listening Comprehension with Communicative Strategies with Jennifer Reeves. So we heard from Francisco Javier from Mexico, who said, I got knowledge on how to prepare communicative listening activities using the three strategies: pre listening, while listening, and post listening. I also learned about new listening strategies that I can start implementing right away. Thank you. And thank you, Francisco, for your response. We also heard from Debisa from Ethiopia, who said, the session was essential and gave me real examples that will help me effectively teach listening. It especially helped me realize I have to do a lot of things for pre listening activities. Thank you very much for such a wonderful session. Thank you for your response. We depend on your participation to make our sessions engaging and meaningful. So we appreciate it when you respond. We also heard from Ha from Vietnam, who said, the webinar was incredibly informative and offered practical strategies I can't wait to implement. The presenter's structured approach will undoubtedly enhance my students' language skills and engagement. So we love to see our teacher participants actively engaged in professional development. So please continue to share your thoughts about our webinars by offering feedback in the end of session quiz or by emailing American English Webinars at fhi360.org. We may feature one of your comments in our next webinar. Throughout Series 20, we are exploring a variety of strategies for developing listening skills in the English language classroom. We hope you are able to use the practical ideas that we share. So here's what you can expect today. The session is about 60 minutes long. The presenter will share the material, and I, your host, will ask questions and make comments. But we really hope to hear from you, our audience, so that we can address your ideas and experiences. Please share your thoughts using the comments feature or the chat box. When our session comes to a close, you will have the opportunity to receive a digital badge for your participation. At the end of the webinar, we'll share a link in the comments. Click on that link and complete a short quiz about today's session. You must answer 2 out of 3 multiple choice questions correctly. If you successfully pass the quiz on your first try, you can expect to receive your badge via email in about a week. And before we begin, we want to let you know about our current massive open online course, TESOL methodology. In this free course, participants will learn current methodologies for teaching English learners of different ages, levels, and context, and discover best practices for teaching listening, speaking, reading, writing, and grammar, and vocabulary. The MOOC is open now and enrollment closes on August 12th. Use the link being shared by the moderator to learn more and to enroll today. Now for today's webinar, understanding what you're hearing, teaching pronunciation features for listening comprehension. Pronunciation instruction is often done with the aim to improve the productive skill of speaking. However, not all teachers and students make the connection between pronunciation and improved listening skill. If students' awareness of the features of English pronunciation is increased, then their ability to listen effectively increases as well. This presentation will focus on how to teach the features of English pronunciation that will help students improve their listening skills. Together, we will examine pronunciation topics such as connected speech linking, thought groups, chunking and pausing, sentence stress, reduced syllables, and rhythm. And we are pleased to introduce our presenter, Paula Runnals. Paula holds a bachelor's degree in Spanish from the University of California at Berkeley and a master's degree in education from Stanford University. She has over 15 years of experience as a language teacher. Paula has taught Spanish as a foreign language in California middle and high schools and to adults in Australia. She has also taught English as a second language and test preparation courses in Spain, New Zealand, and Australia. Paula has specialized in the instruction of academic English and pronunciation. She currently lives in Valencia, Spain, and is a lecturer in UC Berkeley's Summer English Language Studies program. In her free time, she likes to scuba dive and travel. To date, she has lived in 6 countries and has visited an additional 34. Welcome, Paula.
Hello, and thank you. And greetings to everyone all across the world that's out there watching. So as Darlene said, we're going to be looking at teaching pronunciation features for listening comprehension. And I have this little graphic here that just I like because it's a reminder that pronunciation does really underlie all aspects of English teaching, writing, reading, vocabulary, grammar, and speaking. But today we're going to be focusing on the listening part. Okay, so in this session, we will identify which features of English pronunciation are most important for listening comprehension, understand why these features are important, examine 3 features and view some activities to teach and practice them, and we're going to share resources to use for teaching pronunciation. So first of all, let's talk about why. Okay, let's talk about some of our goals and context in relation to teaching pronunciation for listening. The main goal is to raise awareness of features of spoken English. Okay, how many times have your students told you that they can't understand native speakers or they can't understand English outside of the classroom, right? And this is because they're hearing teacher talk or teacherese. When English teachers are in class, we tend to slow down and enunciate like this. But if I'm speaking naturally, my pace will pick up and I'll have different features, such as connected speech, as some of you mentioned in the Menti poll. So for today's talk, I'm going to try to slow my speech down. But when I do teach my pronunciation courses, I use my natural voice because I want the students to not hear that teacher talk or teacherese. One thing is to remember that this is about recognition. Like, it's not important for the students to imitate all these features, but to be aware of what's happening when native speakers speak will improve their listening comprehension. Okay, and we need to be explicit about the difference between when we're teaching pronunciation for their own production to improve how they sound versus reception purposes, and that's what today is about listening. Okay, and so if you can understand that spoken and written English are different, that we should teach these to different students. So again, that's the goal. I'm going to say, what you doing? Not what are you doing? What you doing? Or do you want to go to the mall? Do you want to go to the mall? Instead of do you want to go to the mall? Okay, so native speakers are lazy. We do things to make the least amount of effort when we speak. We don't want to make a lot of effort. And spontaneous spoken language is fast and messy, and we're deciding what we're saying in the moment. So again, this is often very different than what they're hearing in the ESL or EFL classroom. So obviously we have to adjust what we're doing to our different contexts and different learner levels. Okay, but I will emphasize today, I think, the importance of authentic audio. So not just the scripted audio that goes with the textbooks. So they can be aware of what real English sounds like out in the real world. Okay, so this is a very brief overview of the main features of English pronunciation. We don't have time to go into all of them today, but I'm just going to give you their different names that you might see in different resources or textbooks. And we're going to, again, just focus on a few for listening. So the first one that everybody thinks of when they think of pronunciation is phonemes. That's the individual sounds of vowels and consonants. And the next one is word and sentence stress. I put those together here. Just word stress is which syllable is stressed within a word. More stress. When I say stressed, I mean pronounced more strongly. And then sentence stress is which words within a sentence are stressed or pronounced more strongly. Then we've got rhythm. This is the timing or the beat of spoken English. What makes up the music of English, we say. And thought groups and pausing. These are chunks of word, also called chunking, chunks of words that go together to form meaning. And connected speech, when words link together based on their final and initial sounds. And last, intonation, which is the rise and fall in the pitch of the voice. So some people call it pitch. Okay, so before we get started, I'm curious and would like to know which pronunciation features do you think are most important for improving listening comprehension and why? So if you could put a few ideas in the chat or the text box you have, and I'll turn it over to Darlene to read out some of your answers.
Okay, so we're looking forward to hearing from you. Which pronunciation features do you think are most important for improving listening comprehension and why? So let's see what your responses are. Let's see. So we've heard from Muhammad, who said intonation. Nadira said word stress. We heard from Shaw, who said goals and context determine what pronunciation features to focus on, how to teach them, and why they're important for learners to achieve their language learning objectives. We also heard from Elfara, who said rhythm and intonation. So those are some of the responses we've received so far. We also heard from Pablo, who said connected speech. And then Karima said word and sentences so that learners understand the positive or negative sense. Kari said phoneme stress and connected speech. So back to you, Paula.
Okay. So on the next slide, I've listed them all again here for us. Well, segmentals, okay. These are also another name for phonemes, the individual words and sentence stress, okay. And so we're not going to focus on these features for today. Because again, this is what most students learn when they learn about pronunciation. It's the most common what's taught is how to say the consonant and vowels. And they initially learn words through memorizing them individually or through written text. But this is often, again, the dictionary or the ideal pronunciation, not how it sounds in connected speech. But it's easy for teachers to teach these because they're the common problems if you have a classroom all in speakers of the same L1. But phonemes are really only a small part of a bigger system of English pronunciation. So I will say one exception though, which is the schwa. Okay, this is the most common vowel sound in English. One out of about every 3 vowels a native speaker says is the schwa, and many 2-syllable or multisyllabic words will have a schwa. And we're talking about sounds, not spelling. So any vowel, A, E, I, O, or U, can be a schwa in an unstressed syllable, a syllable that is not stressed. So many common words that we use, which reduced to the schwa, like these little connecting words for the you, him, can. And many students will tend to overpronounce these vowel sounds, and that's okay. Again, it's not as important for production, but it is really important for listening. If a student can understand how common the schwa is in native speaker speech, it will improve their listening comprehension. And I just gave you this one example. This presentation is about pronunciation, and there are 6 schwas in that one sentence. So the difference between, they're very, very common is my point. And when I do teach my pronunciation courses, my favorite t-shirt I wear says, "I'm a schwa, I'm never stressed." And the students love it. It gives them a laugh, but it also helps them remember what the schwa is, that it only occurs in unstressed sentences. And that my pronunciation students in my summer courses at Berkeley, when I get the student feedback forms, quite often the one thing when I ask what activity or what helped them the most, or they liked the best, they always talk about the schwa, because no one ever really taught them about it before. And it really increases their awareness of what's happening when native speakers speak. Okay, so the other features I mentioned earlier that aren't the phonemes or segmentals are called suprasegmentals as well. And those are, again, the word and sentence stress, rhythm, thought groups or pausing and chunking, connected speech, and intonation. So for the purpose of today's pronunciation, based on time, what I've selected that I think are the most important are on the next slide. The sentence stress, rhythm, thought groups and pausing, and connected speech. Those are my top 4. That's not to say all the other ones aren't important as well. But I think for listening comprehension, these 4 are the most important, and again, in my opinion. Okay, so why these suprasegmentals? Another word you might also see in some resources is called prosody. So these, as I mentioned, make up the music or the melody of English. And they're not visible in print. In text, we have punctuation to help us with meaning, but not in spoken English. And these features tell the listener what's important about whatever the speaker is saying. And as I mentioned, they're important. Well, they're important for being intelligible, yes, but for the listening comprehension and word recognition is the more important part, what we're focusing on today. And teaching about these things meets the needs of all students. Okay, and I already mentioned a little bit about the difference between teacher talk and scripted audio that's in our textbooks versus real world English. So I'm going to again encourage you for teaching these features to try to use authentic audio. And research has shown that teaching suprasegmentals improves students' communicative competence. That's their fluency and listening skills. Okay, so these are, I've grouped sentence stress and rhythm together for today's, or just for ease for today. Thought groups and pausing and connected speech. So the first one that we're going to focus on is sentence stress and rhythm. Okay, so sentence stress. What is pronounced stress is, as I said, what is pronounced more strongly. So stress is marked by the speaker in their voice by sounding longer, louder, higher, or just in general clearer. So we'll use our voice to indicate stress in those ways. Usually in sentences, the stressed words are nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs, also known as content words. Also WH questions and negatives. The words that are usually not stressed are the small little connecting words like prepositions, articles, conjunctions, pronouns, auxiliary verbs. Those are called function words. Okay, so if I say just a sentence that's incomplete, if I just say David, living, city, month, you can get the general idea of what that sentence is about without having all of the words in it, right? And those Content words is where the stress is going to be. So when I do stress, I usually will snap, which might be a little hard for you to hear at home, or you can clap. So David, living, city, month. David has been living in the city for a month. Right? So if we can teach the students to train their ear to listen to the content words, then the words that have the meaning, this can reduce, and not worry about all of the other little connecting words so much, then this can reduce the pressure on them to feel like I have to understand every single word that's being said. And a lot of these little content words can reduce, or sorry, function words, the words that aren't stressed, will have the schwa in them, as I mentioned before. So again, focusing on the general meaning, the content words, it helps the learners for understanding. Okay, so there's so many activities, but I had to just pick a few. One activity is similar to what I've just done, which is, so again, the purpose of this is to focus on the content words only. And the benefit is training the students to listen to those content words and not worry about the function words can help prove their listening skills and just take some of that pressure off of them about not having to understand every single word. So the instructions are, obviously you need to pre-teach them about sentence stress and the role of content words and what they are. And then pick a phrase and say only the content words in the phrase. Ask the students if they understand the general meaning. Have them predict the phrase, and then they can compare the answers with a partner and give them a piece of transcript. So as an extension, then give them a piece of transcript that maybe has the phrase in it and ask them to underline the content words. And you could then check it one of two, obviously compare in partners as always, but then check it in one of two ways. Either play the audio to check that they underlined the words that are stressed, or you can do it as where you play the audio first and then ask them to underline the content word. So I gave you the example earlier, David, living, city, month. Another example here, if I just say where, want, go, where, want, go, we can understand what that is. And they might predict, the students might predict that as where do you want to go, or where does he want to go? So it can be slightly different, but the content words that are stressed are the same. So that's that prediction part of the activity. Okay, and that's again a simple activity that could be done with any piece of speech. And rhythm, I put these two topics together because those words or that are stressed are what's creating the timing or the beat of spoken English. So English is a stress-timed language. And what that means is that the stress syllables are said at about regular intervals, the same amount of time between the stressed syllables. So the unstressed syllables get shortened to fit in this rhythm. And so if we add in more syllables, we do not slow down our rate of speech in English, as English being a stress time language. So what this sounds like, again, I'll usually snap, but I'll clap so it's louder today. So I have dogs chase cats. The dogs chase the cats. The dogs are chasing the cats. The dogs will be chasing the cats. And so as you can see, the stressed words and the rate I'm saying them at doesn't change. What happens in syllable time language is each syllable takes about the same amount of time to say. So it can sound like it's slower. And so in contrast, English as a stress time language is the rhythm of English, and fitting in these extra little words in between the stressed content words is what can make one of the reasons that English speakers can sound fast when they're speaking. The students say, native speakers speak so fast. Well, it's the rhythm. And so it's this, again, not as important for them to imitate this rhythm themselves, but if they can understand to listen for it in English speakers, and again, focusing on the content words, their listening comprehension will go up. And the other point I wanted to make is there's lots of drills you can do with this. Okay, so let's just try it. There's a little icon here that we had when I first had the question that I asked you guys. So here's a little purple icon again. This means I want you to try it at home. Okay, so I'm gonna clap and I'm gonna say a line, and then I want you to repeat the line and again fit in all the extra syllables. I'll leave one space of a clap and then you can start on the next clap. Okay, so just silently at home, I say a line, you say a line. Okay, so dogs chase cats. The dogs chase the cats. The dogs are chasing the cats. The dogs will be chasing the cats. Okay, how'd you do? Anyway, it can be tricky, but it's fun. Students like practicing these. And again, just it's important for their listening comprehension. Okay, so I'm curious, this is where you can answer the question in the chat, is what is your first language? I'm curious to see how many different ones we have online today. And do you know if it's stressed or syllable timed? If yes, which is it? And if no, then take a guess. It's okay not to know, but think about it and see what you think.
Okay, so what is your first language? And do you know if it is stress or syllable timed? So we're going to look for your responses in the chat and in the comments boxes. So we heard from Doris, who said our first language is Arabic. There's no response as to whether it is stress or syllable timed. But we have another Arabic speaker, Mazin. And let's see if we can get the second part of the question answered as well. And we did, from Francisco, who said Spanish, and it is syllable timed. And we heard from Monica, who speaks Portuguese. Not sure whether that is stressed or syllable timed. And let's get one more. So we heard from Javeria, who speaks Urdu, and it is stressed. And let's see, well, I will also honor that Sana gave us an answer, and Sana said Sindhu, which is stressed. Mazan came back and gave us the answer to Arabic, and he said Arabic isn't stressed.
Okay, as in it's a syllable type.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, and a lot of languages are syllable timed, not stress timed. So students that come from an L1 that is syllable timed, moving into a stress time language, they can struggle with that. And again, so I think we need to teach them awareness about this, and not that they need to repeat, or they'll sound more natural if they repeat the English rhythm, but if they focus on listening to the rhythm, again, then their listening comprehension will increase. Okay, so here's an activity for sentence stress and rhythm. So again, we're focusing on the stressed words and the rhythm to raise the students' awareness of these features and train their ear to listen to English rhythm and stressed content words. So you can select any poem or limerick, which is a type of poem, or other text that you'll read aloud, or if you want to find a recording of one that you can play, there's plenty of resources for that online. And so you provide the students with a copy of the text and instruct students to underline the stressed words as they listen to the text. So, and I've, as I mentioned, I'm usually snapping, clapping. I could tap the table or slap my thigh, depending on what kind of a classroom I'm in and how large the space is. I even sometimes will have students get up and step out, walk, or step in place. To make that physical connection between the rhythm or stress words and physical gesture. Okay, so one example, this is a limerick, and you can give them this text and ask them to underline or highlight, circle, whatever you'd like, the stressed words. And so hopefully they will come up with something that looks like this on the next box. And so and then you can have them try to repeat it. So again, this will sound like there was a young lady named Bright whose speed was far faster than light. She set out one day in a relative way and turned home the previous night. So and again, you can do these kind of drills with any sort of jazz chant, even nursery rhymes, whatever you like using in class. And if you have more advanced students, then you can get them to identify the schwas heard in the unstressed words. Okay, so all of these rhythm and stress and the schwa, these concepts I'm talking about today are all really intertwined. You'll see that what happens in a lot of these different features when things aren't stressed is the schwa shows up. Okay. So moving on to the next one, which are thought groups and pausing and chunking. So a thought group is a group of words that go together to form meaning or chunks of language. So the words go together and they make sense. Okay, so there's a pause between thought groups, and the pause is shorter within a sentence and longer at the end of a sentence, and it will be noted in written form. So when I'm speaking it, I'll use the stop sign with my hand in class. But if you're going to mark it in a written piece of speech, then there's a forward slash where a shorter pause is within the sentence and a long and two at the end of the sentence. You don't have to use both, but just a forward slash. Okay, so the example here, the first item on our agenda is to address parking. So how many thought groups? Just take a guess in your head. There's 3 of them, right? So the first item on our agenda is to address parking. If I paused in a different place, it would sound weird. If I said the first item on our agenda is to address parking, it would sound weird if I pause in different places. So the groups go together to make an idea, the first item as an example. So in each thought group, there is usually a single focus word. And we'll talk more about focus words in a few minutes, but this is usually the last content word in a thought group. This is also known as prominence. So if we're looking at the last content word in each thought group, in this case, then it would be what's highlighted in red here: item, agenda, parking. So again, if I just said those 3 content words to you without the rest of the sentence, item, agenda, parking, well, we know that we're going to be talking about parking as one of the items on the agenda. So that's why these kind of features are interconnected, right? The stressed words are the content words, which are the last word in each thought group. And there's a short pause in between. So again, training our students to listen for that pause, it helps them catch up to what's being said. Okay, so why focus on thought groups? As I said before, in written language, there's punctuation, which is indicating a pause with a comma or a period, full stop. But we can't see this punctuation when we're listening. And changes in pauses can change the meaning. So we have a phrase there. And if I say 2-hour-long exams, then I am talking about the length. The exams are 2 hours long. But if I put a pause in there and chunk it differently and say 2-hour-long exams, then I'm talking about the amount, 2 exams, and the length that are 1 hour long each. So that happens a lot with numbers. Thought groups and pausing activity. This is one activity. So again, you can use any piece of text. I really prefer the transcript so that you can play the recording, and it's a spoken English, not necessarily written English, because we know that they're different. And just take out the punctuation and capitalization from the text at first and give them a copy of it, or you can write it on the board, or however your resources allow you to do that. And then tell them either you're going to read the text or, again, play the recording. There's lots of videos with transcripts. I meant to mention before that, for example, TED.com, TED Talks have transcripts, not when they're on YouTube, but when they're on TED website, but also videos on YouTube. There's an other options section to click on, and oftentimes there will be a transcript in there instead of just the closed captionings. So look for the transcript on your favorite YouTube video. Okay, so then play it, and while they're listening, ask them to mark the thought groups where there's a small pause by putting the forward slash or double slash where they think the sentence ends, sentence or question. And then you can, again, if you want, have them read the text and repeat it. And whenever I'm doing this, I'm also asking the students to physically use the stop sign to make them think about the pauses and connect that physical gesture with the concept I'm teaching. Okay, so here's an example of a text that has no punctuation or capitalization. And so you can it looks a little confusing. And so you can imagine what some spoken English can sound like. So I'm going to ask you to just, oh, no, I'm not going to ask you. We're going to just look, you can look at the first line at home and think about where would you put any pauses. But in the interest of time, we're just going to go on and show the answers. So how I would read this are, thought groups are so vital because they are the foundation upon which many other supersegmental features are built. Using logical thought groups can help a speaker sound more fluent, and it reduces the cognitive load of the listener, which will allow them to better understand your intended message. Okay, so again, it's about training the students to just be aware of the little short pauses. And if they can train their ear to listen for those, then and helps them chunk the language in meaningful groups. This also, if they imitate this, and then especially for academic English and presentations, then they will be much more intelligible if they're able to use thought groups and pauses effectively. Okay, so that's kind of part one. And then to part two, to extend it, would be, as we talked about before, with sentence stress, is identify the focus word. What word is mostly stressed? And as we said, it's usually the last content word of the thought group. So, and again, when I do these thought group pauses or focus words, I always have them compare and partner with each other before we correct it together as a class. So you can maybe look at the first thought group and think, what's the focus word? And then the answers are on the next slide. So we have vital, foundation, built, thought groups. It's not always one word. It can be a compound noun or a phrase. Fluent, listener, and message. Okay, so it's your turn now. Can put in the chat. What other strategies or activities could you do to help your students identify thought groups and pauses while listening?
Okay, so your turn. What other strategies or activities could you do to help your students identify thought groups and pauses while listening? Let's see what you're doing. Some of you are going to tell us what you're doing already. So let's see what you're doing. Okay, so we heard from Ma Ruck, who said, I got it. This is interesting. So give us a comment, hasn't told us, but thank you for that comment. I'm glad this is interesting. Jane said, the best communicative strategy. And then Noor said, sudden pauses. And while we're waiting for some of the other responses to come in, we have a question from Salia, who said, why most people who learn a new language like English will keep accent features from, why will most people who learn a new language like English keep an accent feature from their L1? Is accent a problem? Can you provide any clarification?
No, accent is not a problem. And the goal is no longer, it used to be a long time ago in English language instruction, but the goal is no longer to sound native-like. An accent is not a problem as long as you're intelligible, meaning you can be understood. So that's why I'm saying when we're speaking the individual phonemes of the sounds, that's important to get right, to be intelligible. These other features are more important for the listening comprehension. If a student can imitate these features we're talking about today, then great. They sound more natural in English, but it's not necessary. But I think an awareness of comparing the differences in the features between students L1 and L2 is important, because many of these features are why students do struggle to understand native speakers.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We have some more responses to our question. What other strategies or activities could you do to help students identify thought groups and pauses while listening? So we heard from Azram, who said pauses. Muhammad said you can introduce the text with words stuck together without space, like, and the example was a whole sentence with no spaces in between. So that's one strategy. Then we heard from Manuel, who said turn large sentences into smaller ones that convey a single idea. Aiden said teaching them content and functional words. Christian said listening to songs and repeating, singing actually. From Serge, we said while reading, I can tell them to lift their head and look when there is a big pause and to stop for a few seconds when there is a small pause. Amer said repetition of words and sentences. And Manuel also said songs are a great strategy to teach thought groups. And finally, Claudia said colored text. So these are all some very important strategies or activities that our students use.
Yeah, I just want to comment quickly on Mohammed's, the written thing, words, series of words without a pause. That's called a word snake. I love those, but you can also do them verbally, like without giving them written. You can ask them, how many words do you hear? And you can say a phrase like, I'm all over it. I'm all over it. I'm all over it, right? And that's an example of what we do in the written word snake idea, but you can also do that verbally and ask them to how many words they hear and write down the words they hear in a string of connected speech, which we'll talk about connected speech shortly.
Okay, thank you. Back to you, Paula.
Okay. So as I said, the next topic is connected speech. And words that blend together in a stream of speech is connected speech. And this is because something about the final sound of one word and the initial sound of the next word will make those words connect and almost sound like one word or one continuous, as Mohammed's example, continuous stream of words. Okay, so I'm going to ask you, Darlene, what do you think? What is it about these end sounds what causes the words to sound like they're blending together?
Well, there could be several factors. One could be speech rate, as has been discussed. Another can be accent or dialect, which has also been discussed. But I was thinking also cognitive load, because sometimes when you have a lot of things you're trying to process at the same time, it can make it difficult to pull out those important stress words. Noise in the background can also be a reason that the words sound like they're coming together. So as I said, there could be several factors.
Okay, great, thanks. So let's look at one of the most common ways that this happens is when one word ends in a consonant and the next word starts in a vowel sound. Okay, I'm not talking about spelling here. I'm talking about the sounds. So a couple examples here are I'm American is how I would say it. It sounds almost like the M is moved over or that it's blended into one word. I'm American. I don't say I'm American. I don't stop after that. I don't pause between the words. Same thing. It's and over, that's consonant with an S and O with a vowel. So it's over is how it sounds. Most phrasal verbs do this as well. Stand up. I don't say stand up. No, stand up, stand up. And this can happen not just across two words, but can happen across many words in a sentence, like the man is in our house. I don't say the man is in our house. That sounds very staccato, but we link together in English. The man is in our. So the man is in our house. Those four words can sound like one word. And again, this is one of the things, connected speech is often why students feel like English speakers are speaking fast, because we're connecting and we're not pausing after every word. Okay, the other common one as well is a vowel to vowel. So when one word ends in a vowel and another word starts in a vowel, then a little consonant sound gets inserted into in between the words. So I am turns into I am, I am. There's a Y sound in there, I am. Or you are turns into you are, you are. There's a W sound that sneaks in. And this just happens naturally when native speakers speak. So again, it's about raising students' awareness of this. Okay, so as I said before, how many words? All right. Again, is to increase their awareness and help with their word recognition. So pick any short phrase to read aloud and ask them to count the number of words they hear and have them write them down, write what they heard and compare with a partner and then check your answer as a whole class. And you can also have them try to imitate the connection if you want. But again, not so much important for their own production, but it's important for their listening skills. Okay. So the example I used earlier, I'm all over it. I'm all over it. Common phrase, meaning you're handling a situation, you're taking care of the problem. I'm all over it. That's 4 words. And you can see I've drawn a little curved line there showing the connection. That's how I do it in class on the board or on a paper. Okay. And another example, what are you up to today? What are you up to today? So that's 7 words. What are you up to today? So again, you can just play a little part of speech. You can use Youglish, type in a phrase in youglish.com and it gives you different clips of YouTube saying that phrase and ask them, just play it, not watch it, but ask them to write down what they hear and see how many words there are. It's a simple activity that you can just pop in the middle of anything you're doing, any other activity, listening or speaking activity. Okay, so this is the same example as before, where we looked at the thought groups and the focus words. And I would, again, so you can do, these concepts are all really interconnected, as I said. So you can focus on one at a time, or you can build on them with each other. So we've got the thought groups marked here. And then now let's look for the consonant vowel links. So just have a quick think or read and think, where are the consonant vowel links? I would give the students a piece of paper and ask them to draw the curved little line to connect. So in this text that we've already looked at, there's lots of connections you can see. Groups are, they are, many other, features are, help a, and it, load of, will allow, better understand, you're intended. So all of those are going to could sound like one word because they're linked together with one first word ending in a consonant, second word starting in a vowel sound. So again, making students aware of this connected speech can help improve their listening comprehension if they know that this is happening. Okay, so how would you adapt this idea for your curriculum? It's your turn. Sorry, how would you, in the chat, how would you adapt this idea for your curriculum context or students?
So this is exciting because, one of the things we really hope will happen is that you leave this webinar session with something you can implement right away. So let's see how some of you are planning to do that. So we have heard from Serena, who said, Soledad, who said, this is very interesting. It will help me in my classes. So that's a good thing. That's exciting to know. We also have a question while we're waiting for other responses to come in. Actually, it's a comment from Sanaya, who said, so comprehensive and full of details. This webinar is excellent. The next question, the next response to your turn is, I think after listening, we should write some words from listening and ask students to read. If they didn't pronounce well, repeat the listening part and focus on that. And then we heard from Ovida, who said, generally, we don't focus on phonetics, but this is the best way to improve listening. I'm going to add it to my curriculum. So thank you so much for your responses.
Great. And I love having students read out loud and use these features of pausing, stress, intonation. We all know when students read out loud, they just go flat, right? So pointing these things out and get them to try to imitate some of these features when they read out loud, again, can help them sound more natural. Pronunciation can be connected to any aspect of English. Okay, great. Here's just a quick kind of extension activity, similar to what one of the participants mentioned about imitating, I think. So you can look at these features with what I've talked about and take any piece of transcript and have them try to imitate it themselves. First, they've analyzed it, right? So pick an audio of a native speaker, monologue, not a conversation. Take just 15 to 30 seconds of the video and again, have them analyze the speech and annotate. So that's mark the transcript. Where is the stressed word? Underline the stressed word. Where is the pause in the thought group? Where are there connected speech links happening? They can practice at home and in class in pairs and small groups, and then present it to the whole class. Or if you have a large class, you can do it in groups. And you can have peer feedback, give them peer feedback and teacher feedback. So this is just kind of a little extension productive activity where they're speaking and trying to imitate some of these features after you've taught them about listening, them for listening comprehension. Okay, so just to recap what we've talked about today, briefly, we have a sentence, stress, and rhythm, thought groups and pausing, or also known as chunking, and connected speech, or called linking. So these are some of my favorite resources. I don't have time to go into all of the details about them for you, but there are a variety of websites that have free worksheets, games, videos with transcripts, comprehension quizzes, and tools for making your own voice recording. And my favorite, Learner English Dictionary, because it has a human voice pronouncing in British and American English, the bottom one there. So, all right. Your turn for today. What are your favorite resources for teaching pronunciation? So if you could just quickly put what your favorite one in the chat, and so everybody can read and have a look, and then Darlene can share a few of them.
Okay, so we're waiting for your responses. What are your favorite resources to teach pronunciation? We have a response that says, there is most of the time an activity that highlights this aspect of the target language. I'm assuming this means in their text or in their curriculum materials. We heard from Sahar Gill, who said, adjust the complexity and length of the audio clip and transcript to suit the student level and age. And then Afet said, Cambridge Dictionary is the best for me. Hella said, I'm implementing these strategies when I schedule a song as a vehicle to improve students' listening skill. There is most of the time an activity that highlights the aspect of the target language. So since we're running out of time, we'll look forward to seeing the rest of your comments in the chat. Back to you.
Yeah, great. I saw a few people put Youglish and TED and some other learner dictionaries in the chat too, those are all great resources. Okay, so today we identified which features of English pronunciation are most important for listening comprehension. And hopefully now we understand why these features are important. And we've examined each feature and looked at a few activities to teach and practice it. And we've shared some resources for teaching pronunciation. And my references are on the last slide. And I would just like to thank all of you for listening and attending today, and thank American English for having me as a presenter. And I hope you found some of the activities and concepts useful. Thank you.
And thank you, Paula, for exploring the connection between learners' awareness of English pronunciation features and effective listening skills.